Where's the church going in the next 5 to 10, 20 years? What's it look like?
Lots of different things. I think the markers of identity will both the ones of the past will disappear and new ones will form, and those identities around communities of faith will look. The expression will be different based on each individual person. The local congregational thing is going to drive it, I think, as much as, you look at things like politics these days and it's driven by a national conversation. I think church work is going to be the opposite. I think local. It really is driven by the local. And the more churches can be local, the more they're going to exist. If folks want large church, like if they want this sort of national church feel, no individual church is going to compete with the church that's putting in $40,000 a Sunday into their video production to do online stuff. But there are lots and lots of people out there who don't want that. They want something authentic and unique, and they want it to be like hyper local expression of the church. And the beauty of the internet is that could be somebody, it used to be that when you lost a member because they moved away, they can't participate anymore.
Done, yeah.
Like now, we have members in New Mexico who were in-person members here with us a long time, mostly before me, but now live in New Mexico, where in the streaming of COVID allowed them to start attending church with their friends again. And so I think it's hyper local because it isn't just numbers on the internet. It's like, it's Dave who's in New Mexico, and he's attending because of his personal relationship with the congregation, with other people that he sees, that the name shared at prayer time means something to him in general. But then there are also folks who can attend at distance who need that or have that. And so church is going to be hybrid, and I think the best churches are going to be some sort of unique expression of broad distinctions.
More smaller churches or less?
I think more smaller churches.
Okay.
I think the financials of large churches is going to be harder and harder because I think attractional ministry is harder and harder to do, where the idea that we're going to put out a program like Vacation Bible School, and that's going to bring in families with little kids. I'm not sure how well that really even worked a long time ago,
right.
But there were more people who were looking for church congregations. And so all they needed was an excuse to try a church. And so VBS became an excuse to try a church. And so then they were more resident. I think the only people who go to church these days are people who want to be there.
Right.
And you can see that really negatively, but I see that really positively, is that you have an opportunity as a church to build church out of people who really, really want to be there.
Genuine investment.
And so you don't need, this is the whole thing with YouTube or whatever, you don't need 1 million views. You need 1,000 people who care about what you're watching and what you're producing. You need the core, and churches need that core. And if you can develop a core in some way, that can be enough to, and then you can minister to a broader community than that. But that's how you exist. That's the part. The investment of people is how. So that's why they're smaller,
right.
Because in order to be bigger, you need a bigger number of investors. You need a bigger number of people who are willing to participate sacrificially in church.
Yeah. Which is a huge piece.
Which is, sometimes it's financial, but it's not always financial. Sometimes it's, I've got a gentleman who, he comes by the building pretty much every day, every week, and he changes light bulbs and fixes things. And I could pay him. He works for us, but it's his ministry. It's his care. He loves this place, and he is happy to do that work. And he does it selflessly. And his investment saves us a ton of money.
Yeah.
And so that is his stewardship outside, I'm sure, outside of his financial giving, that is That's huge. And so you could there's a lot of communities that can exist with that kind of investment that doesn't come from financial. And that's where it's like, you need that sacrificial investment, that genuine giving of self to make this thing exist in the world.
So with these localized congregations, how is the real church work of Jesus and being radical about, speaking up for the marginalized and breaking down some of the divisive kind of ideas, how does that flourish through more localized, specialized congregations?
I think that flourishes because when you attend a church of 5,000, you often don't know other people who go there. And some of them mitigate that in all kinds of ways. But when you're part of a real local church, you know those folks. And it allows you to stop having the conversations in social media and in national, on television, and you have conversations with your neighbors about the differences that you have. And it allows you to, if you genuinely follow the words of Jesus as love those who are different than you, then you're going to find a way to I'm not talking about how do I love black people and solve systemic racism. It's how do I love Joe who lives down the street from me or comes to church with me? And if you do the radical work of opening your eyes and loving the people who are local to you, that's one of our challenges here in Boonville is what are the real needs of this community? Who are the people here and what do they really need? And not how do we recruit them to be part of what we're doing? How do we serve them sacrificially as a congregation? And my experience is if you can identify that need really well, then you can do the work. And even if you can't sustain it as a local individual church, partners will come along and find ways to do that. One of the things that was great about working at Broadway was the All God's Children program, which works with children with disabilities. And we didn't have the volunteers to staff this program, but we had a connection to the University of Missouri, and there were students in special ed who needed community service hours for their program that we could be. And so here were volunteers that we didn't even know, we didn't know where they were going to come from when we started it, but we knew what the need was. We had families in our church who had children with disabilities and who had lots of friends with families with disabilities that were there. And so it took us going we want to serve them, and we don't know exactly how that's going to look yet, but we're going to take step 1 and step 2. And so as a local congregation, if you know who are the marginalized in your local community, and my experience is if you have to do that with one-on-one people, it's sort of when you have to solve and bridge the difference between you and me, then when you get attacked, I'm your biggest defender.
Right.
And you get that sort of transformation of it that way. And that's the sort of...
Gotta be side by side.